My name is Akul Gupta. I am an 11th grade student studying in Delhi, and this is episode 2 of my interview series where I explore how career paths after university and how university decisions can help shape our futures. Today, I have with me Mats Lindlow, a partner at a consulting firm called Burnt Oaks Partners.
Yes, I'm Mats lindelöw. I work and live in Sweden. I'm born here. I graduated from an engineering school, Lund University in the south of Sweden, with a major in physics and engineering, and then some economics and language on the side, and then started working pretty early on as a trainee at Ericsson, and was working with Ericsson for many years after graduating, basically, in both Mexico, Sweden, and Portugal.
How did your college decision affect your career? Like going from an engineering to a consulting, you already told me that, it wasn't like too much of a difference because you did a lot of like this work in Ericsson, but like how did your decision at the end, like choosing engineering, how did that affect your career in your opinion?
I think, I mean, that it's a good question, and I've been thinking quite a bit on that myself because I mean, when I was at high school in Sweden, I was good, generally sort of good in maths. I was good in the science subjects. I was pretty decent in like the others as well. But I did feel that I was more drawn to the science and maths side of things. Um, After university, I mean, we did a lot of sort of solid state physics and mechanics and sort of optics, nuclear physics, all kind of, and it was really not. I mean, it was really not so applied. And so when I graduated, I really didn't have a profession per se. It's not like I could go in and start being a programmer and be productive from day one. So I did realize that I needed to find a reasonably sized company that would allow for me to learn and grow in the first couple of years in my role, because it's hard as a young graduate to be productive unless you have had a lot of sort of hands-on professional kind of training in a particular area that is useful for a company. But I did feel, of course, I mean, being an engineer, I would feel out of place in, for instance, a retail company or maybe a media company as they were in the 90s, because they weren't really engineering focused, and tech wasn't really in the 90s when I graduated, or early 90s. Tech was not really permeating the organizations of every company like it is today. So I wanted to go into engineering and tech kind of companies in order to sort of use the skills I built as an engineer. But then pretty quickly, I realized also that I was more drawn to management, to general management, to the overall operation of the business, rather than to hardcore engineering like product development, coding, that kind of things. That didn't really appeal to me. So I drew more rather to sort of project management in change projects, supply chain, strategy, those kind of areas, rather than the classic engineering of product development, for instance.
So as you went further into your career, you realized that you prefer these roles like product management, mergers and accusations. It wasn't like a choice you made in college, but it was something you were
No,
able to learn and develop the skills throughout your career.
I mean, when I was at college, when I was at university, I didn't really realize there were such roles as M&A and product management. I mean, I, I had a pretty blurry view of sort of, I realized, I mean, of course, I understood that you had product development, you had supply chain, you had sales, you had finance and IT and so forth. I mean, the basic, but some of the finer things and the granularity of what happens in an organization, I wasn't really aware of that. And I think if you are in university, try to get into and work during your summer breaks in organizations that, so you get your feet into the water and get a sense of what an organization looks like, what it how it operates, and you understand where what you're drawn to and what you think is interesting. And also try, if you can, to get both insight in large companies or organizations and smaller ones, because an Ericsson of 110, 100,000 people is radically different in the way it operates than like Sinch. When I joined Sinch, there were 400 people. And even then, I mean, they grew. I mean, if you're in a 10 people company, it's radically different from a 100,000 people company, because if you're only 10 people, everybody has to do everything. There is no IT support for you. You have to do that yourself. If you're a 100,000 head company, everything is processed, everything is like outsourced or structured. You focus on your task. Uh, so learning to understand how the different organizations work and where you feel most at home. Do you feel like you're one of the 10 and that you feel really you want to be like a Swiss Army knife that you can handle anything within the company? Or do you feel that you want to focus on your particular role and you rely on your colleagues to provide you with the side services and you hand over to somebody else? Do you want to work as a sort of solo sailor, or do you want to work as part of a 10 head or 20 head project team, for instance? So you try to sort of experience that in an early phase of your career to get a sense of what you feel most comfortable with.
It's really interesting what you said before this about like how you didn't know all these different roles in finance or in companies like the mergers and acquisitions. So what would you recommend for students to break into these roles?
Whatever you do, make sure you deliver on the topic, on the task you're given. So that's one thing, and then be open to the opportunities, because um, my first step into M&A, for instance, that was I was working in a sort of sales management role, some to some degree strategy, but sales management mainly. And then one of the guys I was working with, a more senior guy, he appreciated my work, and he said, "Well, I think you're doing a good job. Why don't you move to this position, working with me in this role?" And then, of course, I'd never done M&A. I didn't even do corporate finance at school. I mean, I did general some economics, but not M&A particularly. But I didn't question whether I would be able to do it because he trusted me. So I studied some on the side, of course, but if, essentially I said yes on the spot or very shortly thereafter.
So would you recommend a job in consulting and finance in today's world?
Generally speaking, yes, I would definitely, because it's and that said, consulting and finance spans a big span. Anything from rock bottom, boring, very stressful, not so inspiring jobs till the great jobs. But in general, yes, and
So when students look at finance, they have to know the good and bad. Like, yes, it pays well and there is a lot of opportunities there, but it is very difficult too with the amount of hours you have to work, correct?
many roles, yes. If you're working with M&A, if you're working with corporate finance in the top firms, especially as a young person, you're expected to work long hours. Um, but not all companies are like that.
So what are some things you look for people if you're hiring? Like, let's say you're hiring somebody, what are you some like key aspects you'd look for an employee you would hire, maybe for your role or for any role in consulting?
So I would say, firstly, integrity. That be honest, be straight, I mean, see things and tell things like they are. Because if there is a problem, you cannot have a person that sort of in some way is trying to sort of hide that problem because it's inconvenient. You need people that are clear and have that integrity. So that's one thing. Communication skills is important. You need to be able to communicate with the client, within the team. So and that should be sort of written and spoken communication. Um, and an analytical ability to sort of see through data, see through structures, and analyze, and so that's important. If possible, creativity. So analytical capability and creativity are not necessarily the same thing. Uh, I'm quite strong on analytics. I'm not quite so strong in creativity. I mean, my wife is much more creative than I am in like everyday things. So I'm working on that. But creativity is an important aspect. Not every role requires it, but it's very useful for somebody. I mean, this is a bit like mathematics or any kind of problem that you're looking for solutions in a small sort of field, but then sometimes the solution is outside of where you're looking. You need to be creative to see that. That's very useful. Um, and the other thing is sort of team players. You need people. We need people that can work together, that are not the solo players, that are not the divas, that in some way accepts the goods and bads of their colleagues and can collaborate with them in a constructive and positive way because you are working in a team in one form or the other with the customer, with the rest of the team within the firm, with the prospective buyer, if that were the case, and so forth. And you need to make people that bond with others, people that find solutions, people that don't create sort of conflict and drama is really useful because if you have one person that is like one of these divas, one of these drama queens, or one of these easy to agitate and that piss people off,
Mhm.
that creates so much bad will within. It's like a virus that spreads throughout the entire organization.
Yeah,
So those are some of the examples. So then, of course, basic skills like the tools you use, and learning, but that's pretty essential, of course.
of course. So I have another question. In a previous interview, I interviewed somebody, and they said that for these type of consulting roles, for these type of like these roles where you're like doing financial services for other companies, you need to know your product somewhat. So like, for example, I interviewed the CFO of Novartis, and he said that he you need to know like your product somewhat. That's why it's like important to understand it. So it kind of leads me to my next question, where it's like, did the engineering like do you think it's do you would you recommend a student to study engineering in order to get into like consulting, like to like understand product better? Like let's say the merger and acquisitions in Ericsson, for example, do you think it would be better to study engineering and then maybe take study an MBA and then go into mergers and acquisitions, or what would you recommend?
If you want to work within a field where engineering in any form or shape is relevant for the company, then having an understanding of engineering is really useful because at least, well, for me, it's been very useful because when I'm discussing, I mean, I'm a really curious person. I like to understand the weather. I like to understand nuclear power plants. I like to understand the soil. I like to understand what makes a leaf green and how does it do photosynthesis. I mean, I'm curious about all kinds of things, sort of software, everything, and that to me is a way, in some way, to understand what is the company doing, what is the potential of their product and the company, what technology breakthroughs can they have in the near future, who are good combinations when it comes to I mean, so you need, in my mind at least, I've been using my engineering and the science understanding as a tool to see what are good combinations of companies, what are good combinations of technologies. Um, you can be a good M&A person, you can be a good finance person and consulting person with only economics. But the more hands-on understanding you have of a company and their products and the business of pharma and life science, or sort of heavy tooling and engineering, or retail, or software development and SaaS, whatever have you, you will make use of that skill. And if you're a pure play economist, uh, it's sometimes. I mean, I've been working with those people, and they are excellent in. If you're doing an IPO, for instance, they know the ins and outs of what are the requirements, what are the legal requirements that you have to fulfill, how do you pass through the approval process of the regulatory authority, all of that they know really well. They know the different sort of financing options and so forth. That is excellent. And for instance, for that pure play financial role, having a financial background is really useful. But in M&A and in consulting in general, I think engineering is really useful.
Interesting. So, in your opinion, you do think it's better that kids start off with some STEM role and then slowly integrate themselves into becoming studying economics or finance?
I think so, and I think that here in Sweden, as I'm sure you know, there is a good combination, and I'm sure there is in other countries as well. But there is an engineering degree with a big component of economics, management, organization, and so forth, which is industrial economics engineer. And
Yeah.
so they don't go as deep in engineering as many of the other engineering degrees here in Sweden, but they have a lot more economics. And so they're really geared towards consulting, general management kind of roles. And I think it's a good compromise where the core is engineering, maths, and pretty challenging in that respect. But you get a lot of the economic stuff that would put you in a good position to be a consultant or general management.
How was it from switching your job from more engineering role to a finance role? Like, how was that transition? I know, of course, you already told me that it was like more like it was like an opportunity, which you said yes to, but how do you think like this opportunity can be presented to others, and like how would you think it would be? How was it in the
I
sense?
mean, yeah, I think that firstly, from when I was in Ericsson, I've been working. I mean, have an engineering background, but I mean, I was working first as a project manager in supply. I mean, we were basically redrawing the entire supply chain map of Ericsson in Sweden. So we were outsourcing work from some factories, we were closing some factories, we were restructuring the flow and so forth. So that was really a logistics slash organizational management kind of change program. So and I was project management for one of the sub projects there in working in that. So in that sense, is that an engineering role? Not really. I mean, I'm not like I was designing hardware or software or in the classical engineering sense. So already from early on, I was working doing more like project management, change management, and that kind of structure rather than hardcore engineering, right? Then after that, I stepped into so I became a sort of supply manager or factory manager for a part of the factory or one of the factories. So I was managing when I was 29, I was managing 230 people in a electronics factory that we had in here in Sweden, and that was very challenging in because all of a sudden I was managing a large organization. We were in this change program. I had to sort of get to know the economics of running the business. So what are the salaries, the product costs, the overheads, and all that. So then knowing the income statement, knowing the balance sheet, I mean that kind of thing was as a general manager you need to understand that. And I think that whatever role you have, understanding the economics of the business is really useful, both the income statement and the balance sheet, but most importantly, the income statement. If you do understand that, then you are sort of already halfway through because then you understand the economics of the business. And then stepping into an M&A role, for instance, that I did several years later, that was just an extension of general management, but with a strategic mind. But with that said, you can come into M&A from a finance perspective, consulting perspective, that you basically do stock listings and those kind of things. Though that's more procedural. I came in from a business and strategy point of view that had been working in general management in the company, and I saw opportunities and I understood the business, but I needed the finance and I needed that kind of thing. So to me, it was very stepwise and evolutionary.
I think I understand what you're trying to say. Like you came from a you like as you evolved in your career, you weren't in like a full engineering role and slowly you developed these skills through each role.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
exactly.
if you could go back and advise your younger self during high school, what academic or career choices might you approach differently, or what advice would you give?
Hmm. I mean, that's a really hard question, and I've been thinking about that. I think that um, if there's anything, I mean, when I was high school age, when I was like 15 through 17, 18, I was relatively unaware of my own self. I mean, I was relatively immature in understanding my own self. I was relatively immature in understanding how other people saw me, whether my good traits and my not so good traits. And I think that for one thing, ask around people. I mean, how they see you. I mean, good friends, family. Um, don't take every answer as a truth, but piece together a puzzle with the things that you're picking up. So, are you good at math? Are you good at being a friend? Are you good at being creative? Are you analytical? Because I didn't understand what my good and not so good sides were when I went to university, and it took me a long while. Even when I graduated, I was pretty unaware. If there's anything, I would have wanted that I was more focused. I mean, I ended up well, but it was more by chance than design. So ask around and get advice from friends, not what you should be doing, but what kind of person are you? Because it's not always that you understand yourself when you're 15, 16, 17, how what kind of person you are. But do that from people that you trust and people that want to be friendly and that you like, because you shouldn't be asking from your enemies. And sometimes your mother and father, they will have somewhat clouded judgment. So listen to your mother and father, but sometimes they say that you could be a really good doctor, not because you are really a good doctor, but because they want you to be a good doctor. So there is a bias from your mother and father that you in some way have to filter. But getting that, that would be the first thing. Um, I would say the other thing is um, that accepting that you don't know, accepting that when you're 17, 18, I mean, with hindsight, I was thinking either engineering or medical school. And I think I did well. I think I could have been an okay doctor, but that was really my career choice at the time. I could have done engineering, slightly different flavors of engineering. Probably I should have done that industrial economics rather than physics, because a lot of the physics I studied, I never use. But I really didn't know. But that would be like something that I was thinking quite a bit about. Did I make the right choice? But and also, it's never too late to change.
Yeah.
So if you do sorry, not med school, but if you do physics, you can still go into consulting and general management. You can take roles and move track.
Yeah. So I think that concludes our time. Thank you so much for your input.